So when our children ask us why we do this time of year, what do we tell them?
Because the Israelites came out of Egypt and we're doing it as a remembrance.
Right. That's when the Father brought us out of bondage, out of the land of Israel, and brought us with an outstretched arm and a mighty hand, or a mighty arm and an outstretched hand. I always get those two mixed up. But he brought us out with his power from underneath Pharaoh. And when Israel fled, right, it was at night. Remember, Brother Cody actually showed up with his bob the other day, which was really cool. But, you know, with your feet shorn and your staff in your hand, you're going to eat this meal in haste because you're out of here tonight, gang, right? And so they fled into the wilderness, and they had no leavened bread. They didn't have time to deal with that stuff, man. They're just packed up and going. We don't have time to have a little thing of dough. What are you going to do? Put it in its own little pot and stick it on top of your rucksack or something while it's raising for the next morning? And so they didn't have any leavened bread, and they fled. And where did they flee? They fled to the wilderness, right? Out there into the great beyond the urbanity that was Egypt at the time. Because no matter what we think about it, you know, that many years ago, for them that was urban and sophisticated. And what they were going into was the great unknown, the wilderness. So they fled from Egypt, and they had no leaven. Leaven represents what? Sin. It also represents the contaminants, the evil influences of Egypt. They left that behind when they went out. And so they had unleavened bread. So Israel came out of Egypt. They came away. They ran away from the flesh pots of Egypt, the cucumbers, the leeks. These are all good things, right? They were like, wow, you know, and we read later how they were all whining about that. But they left all that stuff behind. They also left behind slavery and bondage. Thank you, brother. So they fled without leaven. They fled without contaminating influences. And it strikes me today that just like Israel fled bondage and oppression and very quickly started whining that they really kind of wanted it back. They didn't put it in those words, but they're like, what are we doing out here? I'd rather have all that goodness. It strikes me that that is the same with many of us, the greater us perhaps, today. It's like, man, I just would rather have that stuff after I fled to the wilderness. So Egypt was a type, an example, a representation also of Babylon, right? It's like Babylon. It's where all the good, shiny, good, in quotations, shiny things are. And Babylon is a type of the world system, of what's out there in the world that is just, and knowledge shall increase, right? It's just amazing what's going out there in the world. I mean, the speed of things is really going faster. It's like boom, 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 boom. I wonder if somebody's going to revise that. Is that Boyd's Law? The 18-month doubling of computing power? It seems like it's going faster than that. Yep. Now, it's just like boom, 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 the things that are happening. But Egypt is a type of Babylon. Babylon is a type of the world system. And Israel, we fled at that time, the time of the original Passover, if you will. They fled the contaminants of Egypt, all the evilness that was in Egypt, the influences of Egypt. And we, Israel, are to flee Babylon ourselves. We're to come out of her, my people. In fact, we're starting today in Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So why are we called to come out of Babylon? So that we don't receive of her plagues, so we don't partake of her sins. See, if you're in Babylon, and now Babylon is real, It's metaphorical, it's physical, it's spiritual. It's a big thing. But if you're in Babylon, you can't help but partake of the sins of Babylon. You're just surrounded by it. You're immersed in it. And if you're partaking in those sins, you're going to partake of those plagues. One is, not you. And so we are told to flee that. Israel fled from the bondage of Egypt. They fled without leaven, right? And so without those, again, those contaminating, those adulterants, those evil influences of Egypt. So when they fled, and they left that behind, again, that leaven metaphorically, I mean, they left it physically, they left it behind, but metaphorically, they left those influences behind, and so they were pure, in a way. They were without those influences. They were without that leaven as they moved out. And we are now told to leave Babylon so that we are free of those plagues that aren't around all that sin, aren't partakers of the sin that is in Babylon. So it strikes me that the two go together. Israel fled, and we're going to come back to this a little bit later in the sermon. They fled, and very quickly they were trapped up against what?
Red Sea?
The Red Sea. It's really the Sea of Reeds, right? They were trapped up against that, and then they fled through it, right? You know, through Moshe, the Father made them walk across on dry land, right? So they did that, and Pharaoh, seeing them running across the dry land on the sea, says, "Let's go!" And he takes his army, and he pursues Israel, who's fleeing. Now remember, we're drawing a correlation here between the leaven and Egypt and Babylon and the plagues. And so he chases them with his army, with all his might and power, if you will. And what happens to him? The oceans collapse right down upon him and destroy his entire army like that. Destroyed in an instant. In a very short period of time, his whole army is destroyed, and yet Israel escapes. Revelation 18, verse 10. Standing afar off from the fear of her torment, saying, "Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come." You see, it's the same thing. We're told to leave Babylon, just like the Israelites were told to flee Egypt, and then they get through the sea, and very quickly the sea crushes upon Pharaoh's army. We're told to come out of her, my people, come out of Babylon, because in 1 hour, again, in a very short period of time, total destruction comes. The Israelites were warned. The Israelites were told, put this blood on the door and the lintel, or your firstborns are going to die. Obedience brings blessings. They did that. They left. They went through the ocean. I'm sure that was scary. They see the whole thing open up, the water's rising up on both sides, and they're like, let's go. They were afraid, but when they did it and the enemy came after them, the enemy was crushed. So that was after leaving the leaven behind. And Sister Kate and I were talking yesterday about how this year, I've been on a little diet for the last couple weeks, and I've actually really been avoiding bread and cake and cookies and stuff like that, all that leavened stuff, crackers. Anyway, I'm not really craving leaven. Like, I remember a couple years ago at this time, you know, it's like, whoo, sundown, man, bread, yes, I want some bread. But metaphorically, are you craving leaven? Because, see, we've just gone a week without leaven, and now we can go back to leaven. Are you craving leaven? I hope not, metaphorically. I hope you're digging what we've been doing. And so the Israelites, they fled to the wilderness. They flee to the wilderness. Did they eat leavened bread in the wilderness?
Ate manna.
They didn't eat leavened bread because they left it all behind, right? They didn't have any anymore. Did they bring any little packets of yeast so they could make raised bread? They didn't. They ate unleavened bread. They did this for 30 days. We're going to get to that. But check this out. For their first 30 days of freedom, for their first period of freedom, they are partaking of sustenance give us this day our daily bread, right? They are partaking of sustenance undefiled by Egypt, where they just left. Again, physically, there is no Egyptian leaven. There's no Egyptian yeast particles in their bread. And spiritually, without all that nonsense from Egypt. So for 30 days, they're good. I guess they had in their bug out bags 30 days worth of flour or something. Or maybe they only had about 20, because let's turn, that's a totally made up number, by the way, 20 in my head. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 16. Exodus 16. What happens after they run out of that flour that they brought to make that unleavened bread? They got hungry. Anybody remember the Blues Brothers? You go hungry, bow, bow, bow. They got hungry. Look at Exodus 16. It would help if I was there. Verse 1, and they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. So, 30 days, right? And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moshe and Aaron in the wilderness. 30 days. A month. People say, I could do that standing on my head. I could hang in the pull-up position for 30 days if I had to. In 30 days, the man who Yah chose to lead Israel out of bondage, and if you remember, towards the end, it was a hard, bitter bondage. Remember, they had to go cut their own straw and still make the same number of bricks? So it's pretty terrible living there. Within 30 days, they're murmuring against Moshe and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, would to Elohim that we had died by the hand of Yahweh in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Wow. Tell you what, Moshe was a good guy. I've said before he had anger issues, and I'll stand by that. But man, he cared about the Father's promises, because at that point, you see this if you watch that movie Defiance. There's a lot of, this whole Exodus thing goes all through that movie Defiance. Daniel Craig and Liv Schreiber. And the one brother's telling the other brother, man, let's leave these losers and boogie. Let's get out of here, because these guys are just a bunch of whiners. Well, that's what they're doing. All right. So he's like, hey, would that we would have stayed. Let's keep going. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or no, in my Torah or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So on the 6th day they're going to gather twice as much, which to my mind translates to they're working twice as hard. They're carrying twice as much stuff on the day of preparation. And Moshe and Aaron said unto the children of Israel, at evening, when you shall know that Yahweh has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and in the morning, then ye shall see the glory of Yahweh. For he that hears your murmurings against Yahweh, and what are we? Now this is Aaron and Moshe, that you murmur against us. And Moshe said, this shall be when Yahweh shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread, for Yahweh hears your murmurings which ye murmur against him. And what are we? Your murmurings aren't against us, but they're against Yahweh. See, Yahweh he used Moshe to bring the people out of Egypt into the wilderness. And they start murmuring against him. They start griping, kvetching against him. And they're not murmuring against Moshe. They're murmuring against Yah's tool, which means they're his implement. And therefore, they're murmuring against Yah. They're not trusting him. Moshe spake unto Aaron, say unto the congregation, children of Israel, come near before Yahweh. He has heard your murmurings. And it came to pass, as Aaron spake unto the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked towards the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, at evening ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread. And ye shall know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. And it came to pass that at evening the quails came up, and they covered the camp. And in the morning the dew laid round about the army. It says host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, it is manna, for they wist not what it was. What's manna mean?
What is it?
What is it? They didn't know what it was. They're like, what's that? All right, we'll call it, what's that? And Moshe said unto them, this is important, this is the bread which Yahweh has given you to eat. Our whole theme today is bread, unleavened and otherwise. And this is the thing which Yahweh has commanded. Gather it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in your tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more, some less, because some had more people, some had less people in their tents. Sister Kate and I would only gather 2 omers. And when they did meet it with an omer, he had gathered much. And when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moshe said, let no man leave of it till the morning. What else weren't we supposed to leave till the morning?
The goat.
The lamb, right? The goat, the kid of the first year. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moshe. They didn't listen. Here they are. They're complaining on this day that they're not getting fed. Then they get fed, and here's the rules for feeding, and they still don't listen. They don't listen. They hearkened not, they listened not to Moshe, but some of them left of it until the morning, and it bred worms, and it stank, and Moses was mad with them. And they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. And when it came to pass that on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. And the rulers of the congregations came and told Moshe. And he said unto them, this is that which Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto Yahweh. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seethe that which ye will seethe. Bake what you're going to bake, boil what you're going to boil today, Friday, the day you also picked up twice as much manna. So yeah, you're not just cooking for today, you're cooking for tomorrow, and oh, by the way, you're picking up more food. I know Sister Kate a lot of times goes shopping on Friday to get more food in addition to everything else. And that which remains over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. Now remember, the last time they kept it over because they didn't trust the Father, it rotted, right? It went bad. But this time it's going to be okay. And they laid it up till the morning as Moshe bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. And Moshe said, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto Yahweh. Today ye shall not find it in the field. There's not going to be any manna in the field today, guys. You don't need it. You got fed yesterday. Enough. You got enough gathered yesterday. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day for to gather. And they had none. I did a video recently where I guess it was a write-up. And it was a little bit philosophical. And I was talking about when is enough enough? See, there's a lot of people who are afraid to leave Babylon because they need a good job to make good money. That's the excuse they make. But then my question becomes, when is enough enough? When do you have enough? These people clearly had enough manna to eat. They gathered twice as much manna on Friday, and yet they still went out for more. On Shabbat. On the day that they were told, chill. It's a rest day for Yahweh. Don't do any work. Do all your work the day before. But they did it anyway. And they went out, and obedience brings blessing, and disobedience brings no blessings. There was no manna. They're not getting a leg up on anybody. And Yahweh said unto Moshe, how long refuse you to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for Yahweh has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you on the 6th day bread for 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place, let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. And the house of Israel called thereof manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And Moshe said, this is the thing which Yah commands. Fill an omer of it to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread wherewith I have fed you in the wilderness, and when I brought you forth from the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said unto Aaron, take a pot, put an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before Yahweh to be kept for the generations. And Yahweh commanded Moshe, so Aaron laid it up before the testimony. That's the ark. There's a pot of manna in the ark. And someday when we find that ark again, scientists are going to be like, wow, now we know what this was. To be kept. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years. Until they came to the land inhabited, they did eat manna. Until they came to the borders of the land of Canaan, and now an omer is a 10th part of an ephah. Okay. So they ate manna. They began their journey clean, if you will, eating unleavened bread. So that's a good thing. But then when that ran out, they ate something even better. They ate the pure bread of Yah. And as a matter of fact, we should go back there and look at that because you need to remember this for later. Look at verse 15 again. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, it is manna, for they knew not what it was. And Moshe said unto them, this is the bread which Yahweh has given you to eat. This is the bread. Remember that. This manna is the bread that Yahweh has given you to eat. You didn't make it with your own hands. He gave you this bread. So if you thought unleavened bread was cool, this is better. If you think unleavened bread is free of the influences of sin and worldliness and Egypt, if you will, this is the pure bread of Yah that they're given, this manna. Bread symbolizes throughout the word of Yah. That's what it symbolizes, bread. 2 examples. Let's look in Deuteronomy chapter 8. Verse 1. Deuteronomy 8, verse 1. All the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which Yahweh sware unto your fathers. And you shall remember all the way which Yahweh thy Elohim led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, while they were eating manna, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou would keep his commandments or no. And he humbled thee, and he suffered thee to hunger, and he fed thee with manna, the best thing he could feed you, which you knew not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man does not live by bread only, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh does man live. We don't live by this physical stuff in our bellies. We live by the word of Yah, and that's what manna represents. Turn to Amos, almost to the New Testament. Amos chapter 8, verse 11. The word is related to bread. Bread is related to the word. Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh Elohim, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro, and seek the word of Yahweh, and shall not find it. There's a famine coming, and it's a famine for hearing the word of Yah, and I submit to you, it's already started. There are parts of this book that you cannot read in public in Canada. It's against the law. More's coming. More's coming. There's going to be a famine. This book will end up being made illegal. Get a couple of them, cache them somewhere. But the word is bread. Bread is the word. So bread represents the word of Yahweh. Unleavened bread, therefore, is the pure, unadulterated word of Yah. Free from impurities and adulterants and influences. Pure word of Yah, free from the influences of man, the traditions of man. See, this word, and we all know this because most of us here came out of mainline Christianity. This word has been adulterated and twisted by people to mean what they want it to mean, and the traditions of man make void the word of Yah. And so the pure word is free of that. Unleavened bread, the pure word of Yah. What does word represent? Bread. Bread represents a word. Word represents bread. It's all kind of, I don't know, represent is maybe not the exact right English word I'm looking for, but they're tied together. Let's go to John, New Testament. In the beginning was what?
The word.
And the word was
Made flesh
with God.
And the word was God.
Hallelujah. See? I don't have to turn there, but I'm going to do it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, Elohim, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehends it not. In the beginning was the Word. Let's go to chapter 6 of John. John 6, chapter 30. This is coming after the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. Okay, and now Yeshua has left that scene and he's alone with his guys and they're talking. Verse 30. And they said therefore unto him, of 30 of John 6, what sign showest thou then that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And then Yeshua said unto them, verily, verily, whenever he says that, we got to pay attention. I say unto you, Moshe gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. Now they're talking about manna, right? Mm-hmm. They're saying, hey, you just did this miracle with the loaves and the fishes, but let's focus on the loaves. Tell us, what are you going to do now? And he goes, hey, Moses didn't give you that manna. The Father gave you that bread. And he's talking about manna. For the bread of God is he which comes down from heaven and gives life unto the world. Now we read in verse 15, I told you pay attention, this is the bread of God, this manna. And now Yeshua is saying the bread of God is he which comes down from heaven and gives life unto the world. And then he said unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. So can you see how Yeshua is manna and manna is Yeshua? And again, we're metaphorically speaking here, but that's what they're saying. And they're saying, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Yeshua said unto them, I, if it wasn't clear enough before, I am the bread of life. He that comes to me shall never hunger, and he that believes on me shall never thirst. Mm-hmm. That's pretty plain. He's taking it and he's tying manna into him, and if you partake of him, you will never need anything else. All these people out there with their addictions and their problems and their issues, whether it be they are shopaholics, or they are hoarders, or they are cat people, or they are guys that buy way too many, guns. I don't know, whatever. These people and other issues, I just don't want to get too personal. Those people are suffering from a lack of Yeshua in their life. They have a hole in their life. They're hunger. They're trying to fill it, and they can't fill it because they're not partaking of the manna of Yah. They're not partaking of Yeshua. And so therefore, the good news is that's what we need to do. We need to focus on him, not this other stuff, literally and figuratively. Look at verse 48. I am the bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness, and they're dead. That's pretty harsh. Your ancestors ate bread in the wilderness. They ate manna, and they're dead. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread, that's what he's saying, which came down from heaven. If any man eats of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Which is why we did the Lord's Supper. We partook of the bread and the wine last weekend. That's exactly what he's talking about. And then one more, just look at verse 57. As the living Father has sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. This freaked the Jews out, because their brain was just stuck on cannibalism. It's basically what they were thinking about. They couldn't click their brain up to a higher level and see what he was talking about. Yeshua is the bread of life. Yeshua is the pure manna. You have unleavened bread, which we're in the middle of, or we're at the end of, the feast of unleavened bread. And then they ate that for a while, and then they got to eat manna. And Yeshua is like, hey, that's me. We observe this feast, this moed, this appointed time of unleavened bread every year, because we're told to. And we have called to our mind that unleavened bread is bread without leaven, it's without sin, right? And so then we know that Yeshua died for us, and he took the penalty of our sin, and we talked about that last week. He took that out of our lives, and that's good, and that's awesome. But the pure bread, even more pure than unleavened bread, is Yeshua. He is like the manna. Almost stopped there, but the Father grabbed me. So I was Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the final day. And we're told to observe this day and have a holy convocation, and we're doing that. Why this seventh day? What's the number 7 mean? Biblical mathematics. Spiritual perfection. You look all through the Bible. Every time you see 7, it represents spiritual perfection. So it symbolizes that we have gone without leaven for 7 days, spiritual perfection. We've been separated from those things of the world, those contaminants, and therefore now we are becoming spiritually pure from the influences of the world and sin and stuff like that. You ready for something cool, though? See, it's giving me goosebumps. 7th day. It's a tradition, but man, I believe it. I really do. And you know me. When somebody says the sages say, I'm just like, stop. Israel crossed the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds, on the 7th day. And see, this is the Jews who believe this, who don't believe anything about where I'm getting ready to go now. Which is why, see, I'm getting more bumps on my arms right now. So on the 7th day, they were pursued by Pharaoh's army. They think they're going to die. The sea opens up. They go across on dry ground. They are delivered on the 7th day. They are also, again, symbolically baptized in the waters. They go through the waters, so they are symbolically baptized. So they've had their 7 days of unleavened bread, their separation from Egypt, and now they are finally delivered, and they are baptized as they go through the Red Sea. The 7th day represents washing away of our sins that Yeshua did. Were washed in the blood of the Lamb. It's the same thing. It represents that we are now spiritually, if you will, perfected as we're going to be in this life. Our sins are washed away. We've been baptized in his blood. Again, metaphorically. On the 7th day. That's what this day represents to us. We are Israel. Whether blood-born, grafted in, we are Israel, and we are truly blessed. And we're going to see as time goes on how much we're blessed compared to other people. There's a lot of things that happen in tribulation that do not affect us. See that you touch not the oil and the wine. It's not going to affect us because we're blessed. And we're blessed because he chose us and because we accept that choosing and we're obedient. The two work hand in hand. Exodus chapter 12, verse 14. This feast, this Moedim, this Moed, this appointed time with Yah. Let's look at Exodus 12:14. How long we're going to keep it. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast unto Yahweh throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an ordinance forever. It doesn't say until Messiah comes. It doesn't say until he nails the Torah to the cross, which both of those things didn't happen like that. Didn't happen. It says forever. We're doing it. I think we're good right there. And so we keep this time, this festival, this feast, this remembrance forever. Not just until Yeshua came 2,000 years ago. And in fact, Ezekiel, which we're not going to turn there today, we're going a little bit long. Ezekiel speaks of how we're going to keep this feast in the millennium. When Yeshua comes back and establishes his reign and it's the millennium, we're still going to be doing this with him. This is practice for that time. And so this feast, if you will, this appointed time reminds us to purge out the leaven from our lives, to get the worldly influences out. How many people here are totally free of worldly influences? Darn, I was going to ask you how you did that. I know how we're supposed to do it, right? And so do you. It's to remind us of purging out the worldly influences of our lives, help us refocus a little bit, reminds us to get rid of the sin in our lives. Now, we know our sin is covered by the blood of Christ, but we also know we're not supposed to sin. And we also know that we still stumble every now and then and sin. So this is to focus us on not doing that. Should we sin that grace may abound? God forbid. This is what this time does. And instead of that leavened bread, if you will, we are to partake of the pure, unleavened bread. That is Yeshua. That's what we should desire. Him, not the world. In closing, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Because when we partake of Yeshua, that bread, that manna, it sustains us. And we don't hunger anymore. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 6. Your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Purge out therefore the old leaven. That's what we're talking about this week. That ye may be a new lump, as you are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth, which I submit to you is Yeshua. Let's pray.